Our marriage seemed perfect, full of love, trust, and support. I truly believed what we had was real, but everything fell apart in an instant when I accidentally found out my husband had been having an affair for an entire year. He was living a double life while I was trapped in the illusion of happiness. Now I realize I had been in love with someone I never really knew. I knew something was wrong the moment I found his cologne on the passenger seat of my car. It was a scent I hadn't smelled in over a year. Rich, heavy, and expensive. The kind he used to wear when he still cared about my opinion. When he still cared about us. I sat there frozen, gripping the steering wheel, watching the bottle gleam under the sunlight like a confession. The strange thing was, he hadn't been in my car for days. And we never used cologne anymore. We didn't do much of anything anymore. Reed and I had been married for 13 years. We met in college, married young, built a life that looked perfect from the outside. 2 kids, a house in the suburbs, matching pajamas every Christmas. He was a financial consultant, good with numbers and even better with charming people. I worked in marketing and had recently gone part-time to focus more on the kids. Everyone said we were the power couple of our block, but power fades quickly when one side stops charging. About a year ago, I began noticing shifts in Reed's behavior. At first, they were small. Missed dinners, shorter conversations, a distant look in his eyes that always came with a forced smile. Then came the late-night calls, the sudden weekend meetings, the password change on his phone. When I asked, he laughed it off. "You're overthinking again," he'd say. "It's just work." And I believed him. Because that's what trust is, right? Giving someone the benefit of the doubt even when your gut screams otherwise. But my gut wasn't just screaming. It was begging me to see the truth. After I found the cologne, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to him, staring at the ceiling, wondering whose perfume lingered on his jacket that he left in the hallway. I replayed our last few months over and over. How we hadn't touched in weeks. How he flinched when I leaned in to kiss him. How he smiled more at texts than at our children. Still, I said nothing. I wasn't ready to blow up our life. I told myself I needed proof. Cold, undeniable proof. So I started paying attention. I noted his new shirts, the gym visits he never had time for before, the work trips that suddenly involved overnight stays. I checked our credit card statements, hotel charges, restaurant bills, a boutique I'd never even heard of. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But most of all, I wanted to understand what I had done wrong. The worst part was that he wasn't cruel. He still asked if I'd eaten. Still brought me coffee in the mornings. Still called me babe out of habit. That hurt more than anything else. The pretending, the performance. Like I was too dumb or too comfortable to notice the set had changed behind the curtains. I thought about confronting him 1,000 times. Practiced what I'd say in the mirror. Wrote it out in notes I never sent. But every time I opened my mouth, fear paralyzed me. What if I was wrong? What if I wasn't? Either answer would shatter me. I decided I needed time to think. I told Reed I was taking the kids to my sister's for the weekend. He barely looked up from his laptop, just nodded and muttered, "Tell her I said hi." As I packed, I stared at our wedding photo on the dresser. We looked so young, so hopeful. I touched the glass, half expecting the woman inside to blink and warn me not to go through with it. But she just smiled, frozen in time. In the car, the cologne bottle sat in the cup holder, heavy like a stone. I didn't throw it away. I wanted him to know I saw it. I wanted him to feel the silence that followed. That weekend, I cried more than I had in years. My sister tried to console me, but there was nothing to say. I wasn't angry yet. I was just broken. And in that brokenness, I finally understood. This wasn't just about cheating. It was about the slow, quiet death of everything I had believed in. And I wasn't sure if it could ever come back. When I came back home after the weekend at my sister's, everything was in its place. But something felt off. The kitchen towel hung unevenly. The kids' jackets were thrown over the rack like someone was in a hurry. There was a mug on the floor, and I knew I hadn't left it there. These were little things, but that day I noticed them all. Not like a wife returning home. More like a stranger stepping into a familiar space that no longer felt like hers. Reed didn't ask how the weekend went. He didn't ask how the kids were. He just said, "You're back early," like I'd interrupted his schedule. I nodded, walked into the kitchen, and set down the bags. He stayed in his office, didn't even get up. I didn't start a fight. Just quietly tidied up, unpacked the kids' things, fixed the bedding. All of it on autopilot. I saw 2 coffee cups on the table, both with dried coffee stains like they'd been sitting there for days. One of them wasn't ours. A cup I didn't recognize. The next day, I dropped the kids at school and drove to the mall, even though I didn't need anything. I just didn't want to go back home. I sat in the parking lot, watching people walk by, wondering how they did it, how they just walked, talked, lived, like everything was normal. I remembered a strange call Reed got a few weeks back. The number wasn't saved, but he reacted quickly, left the room mid-sentence. I hadn't thought much of it then. Now, I couldn't let it go. I checked the credit card again. The latest charge, some restaurant we'd never been to. Upscale, with a wine list. Then flowers, a canceled payment from a boutique. All of this in the background of our daily life, where he didn't even ask if I needed a new coat or how work was going. Not because he was mean. He just didn't care anymore. I wasn't looking for a confession. I was just watching. I knew he'd come home at 7, tired, wearing that face that said everything was fine. But he didn't ask how I was. He might hug the kids, grab something from the kitchen, but between us, it was silence. He'd gotten very polite. That bothered me the most. I tried not to show that I knew. Why would I? He'd deny it, or change the subject, or ask if I was okay. Like I was the one imagining things. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to beg. That night, I took a shower. When I came out, he was already asleep, facing the wall, like always lately. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring into the dark, wondering how we got here. No fights, no yelling, just drifting apart in silence. I didn't cry. Not anymore. Everything inside me felt tight. But still, I knew eventually this would end. The only question was, would I leave first, or would he be the one to finally say it? I turned off the light and laid down without touching him. We were on the same bed, but might as well have been on different floors. And I knew, if nothing changed, it would only get worse. The entire week after the trip to my sister's, I was living on autopilot. I came home Sunday evening, set the bag down in the hallway, and Reed didn't even get up from the couch. Just nodded and asked if I'd gotten the kids any treats. I mumbled something back and went to unpack. Inside, everything had already collapsed, but outside, I kept going through the motions. The next day, he went to work like nothing had happened. Like everything between us was still the same. And I kept waiting. Would he say anything? Did he notice his cologne was gone or see the tired, puffy look in my eyes? Nothing. Complete indifference. He had become a stranger. Or maybe he'd been one for a while and I was just too blind to see it. I started collecting proof. Not because I wanted to confront him in some dramatic scene. I just needed something solid to hold on to. I was drowning, and I needed to know what I was holding on to. I began checking his call history, took screenshots when he left his phone on the kitchen counter. He had long changed his passcode, but one evening he left it unlocked. I saw messages from someone saved as Grace. But this wasn't casual chat with a friend. Too many ellipses, too many flirty undertones, sometimes food pics, sometimes jokes he hadn't shared with me in months. I ran the number through a search. It belonged to a man. I didn't make a scene. I didn't cry or yell. I just sat in the bathroom with his phone in my lap and stared at the screen while the bathwater turned cold. He was texting this man in the evenings, when I thought we were watching a movie or having dinner. When I, like a fool, put a plate in front of him and asked about his day. It wasn't the texting that hurt the most. It was that he didn't text me anymore. Everything we had, our inside jokes, the way we talked, our small habits, he gave that to someone else. Freely, without guilt. At some point, I started to feel invisible. Not in a poetic sense. Literally. My words passed right through him. He'd respond, but not listen. Look, but not see. I could have said anything, even nonsense, and he would have just nodded. I stopped making dinner for him. He didn't notice. I stopped ironing his shirts. He wore a wrinkled one to work and walked out. I wanted him to ask me, just once, if I was okay. But he didn't. Or maybe he did, but I had already stopped believing any of it was sincere. One night, I sat in the car outside our house and turned on the voice recorder. Just talked into the silence, trying not to lose my mind. Saying things out loud helped organize the pain. That's when I finally said it. I don't think he loves me anymore. It sounded almost calm. No sobbing, no drama. Just a fact. I stopped the recording and went inside. He was already asleep on the couch. The same couch we used to cuddle on and watch movies in the early years of our marriage. Now it smelled like someone else. I laid down next to my daughter. She put her arm around me and mumbled in her sleep, "You're sad, Mom." I didn't answer. I just held her and stared at the ceiling. All I needed in that moment was to survive until morning. I realized I had started watching him without even meaning to. In the morning, how he dressed, what time he left, how long he brushed his teeth, what mood he was in. All of it suddenly felt like it mattered, like every small detail was a clue I had never known how to read. On Monday, he stayed late at work. I didn't text or call, I just sat in the kitchen and waited. Not because I wanted to fight. I just wanted to see how long his meeting would take. He came home close to midnight, smelling like someone else's perfume and alcohol. Said he'd been at a corporate dinner. I nodded. I didn't ask who else was there. He relaxed, gave me an automatic hug, and headed to the shower. I stayed seated. One thought kept spinning in my mind. He wasn't even hiding anymore. He wasn't afraid. That meant he was sure I wasn't going anywhere. On Tuesday, I went to the boutique where he'd recently made a purchase. I knew the exact amount. The saleswoman was surprised at first, but then she remembered. Said a man in a suit had bought perfume and a silk scarf. For a young woman, probably, she added with a smile. I smiled back, but my eyes tightened with pain. On Wednesday, I opened our shared laptop. We used to both use it, though lately he preferred his work one. This one still sat in the living room. I checked the trash bin. There were deleted PDF files of hotel bookings, movie tickets. Nothing unusual unless you knew that on those days he claimed he'd been working late. One file had the date of our anniversary. Turned out he didn't just forget. He'd spent the night at a hotel, not with me. On Thursday, I wrote a letter. Just opened my email and started typing, not to send it, just to let it out. I wrote how much it hurt, how I felt like a stranger in my own home, how I'd look at him in the evenings and not recognize the man sitting beside me. I didn't accuse or yell, I just wrote, and then deleted it. He didn't need to read it. I just needed to write it. On Friday, I went to my sister's again, without the kids. I told her I wanted to stay the night. Just one night without hearing him breathe beside me. She welcomed me with a blanket, some wine, and silence. We barely spoke. We just sat. And that was enough. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know if this was worth fighting for. Phrases from movies, books, and other people's stories kept swirling in my head, but none of them fit. Because this was my life, and it was slowly tearing at the seams. I still wasn't ready for a conversation, but I knew it was close. I wasn't afraid anymore. I just wanted to know if there was anything real left on the other side of the lies, or if I'd been holding on to smoke all along. I hadn't slept much lately. I would lie there listening to his breathing, the way he shifted in bed like he couldn't find his place anymore. We hadn't had a real conversation in weeks, just exchanged the basics, about dinner, school, appointments. He didn't ask how I was feeling anymore. And I didn't ask him, because I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. On the third evening in a row, I couldn't take it and just went to sleep in the kids' room next to our youngest. He didn't say anything, just turned to the wall. I lay there, surrounded by toys, thinking how strange it was that this was the only place I still felt safe. Beside my daughter, in the room where trust still lived. I spent 2 nights like that. On the third, he didn't even come home. Said he worked late. I didn't believe him. Still, I hesitated, delayed, as if hoping someone would step in or something unexpected would happen. But nothing did. Instead, something else happened. I found a browser tab on his laptop. He'd been searching for a 1-bedroom apartment. It hit like a slap. He had already made a decision. Just didn't bother telling me. I stared at the screen and realized there was no point waiting for a conversation. It had already happened. Wordless, through actions. So I began packing. Slowly. I didn't scream, didn't stage a scene. I just started sorting the kids' clothes, putting their books into boxes, taking our pictures off the walls. He realized I was leaving only when he saw the suitcase by the door. He stood there for a moment and asked where we were going. I said, "Somewhere no one lies to us anymore." He nodded. No arguments. No regret. We rented a small apartment on the edge of town. The first night, I couldn't sleep. His voice still echoed in my head. His scent still clung to our daughter's pillow. My oldest stayed quiet. The next morning, she asked softly, "Are we here forever?" I didn't know what to say. I told her, "For a long while." She nodded. Our youngest missed him. She cried at night, asking why Daddy didn't come anymore. I told her he'd visit and that we'd make a schedule so things would feel stable. The truth terrified me too. It felt like a weight settling on my shoulders, heavy and unfamiliar. I started seeing a therapist. He suggested I keep a journal. So I did. Every morning before the girls woke up, I'd write what I felt. Sometimes it was chaos. Sometimes just lists. Things I feared. Things I was grateful for. Things I couldn't forgive. It helped me stay sane. Reading back, I saw I was moving further than I realized. We weren't divorced yet. The paperwork was in progress. He sent child support, called the kids on schedule. But to me, he no longer existed. Just a ghost who still flickered in conversation but no longer affected my weather. I'm learning how to live again, on someone else's kitchen floor, sipping from a mug I bought myself. No more cold glances, no more pretending. It's not easy. But every day I wake up and realize I can be honest with myself. That's already a win. A small one, but a real one. The family therapist greeted us with a gentle smile, as if he already knew how it would all end. We sat in our chairs, me, the kids, and him. My husband came in last, with that usual tired face. I noticed how he glanced at his watch, not even hiding the irritation. The therapist started simply. He asked each of us to say why we were there. I spoke first. Honestly, without blaming anyone. I said I wanted the kids not to fear the future, that I wanted to understand whether there was anything left to save, at least for their sake. The kids stayed silent. My older daughter held my hand. The younger one buried her face into a stuffed rabbit. My husband sighed, shrugged, and said a phrase I kept replaying in my head for days after. If she wants a show, let's give her a show. 20 minutes later, he walked out. No drama, no yelling. He just stood up and left, saying he wasn't going to entertain my resentment. The therapist looked at me with quiet sympathy but didn't push. He just said softly, "That's an answer too." After the session, I didn't go home. I picked the kids up from school and drove to a small seaside town where I used to spend summers with my grandmother. I hadn't booked anything in advance. Just turned on the GPS and said, "Let's go." The drive took almost 5 hours, but the kids didn't complain. It felt like they knew we weren't just going on vacation. We stayed in an old cottage by the shore. Everything was modest. Squeaky beds, a weathered fence, the scent of salty air. But when we walked to the water in the morning, my younger daughter laughed so purely that I realized I hadn't heard that sound in ages. That day we had ice cream, built sandcastles, watched seagulls, and sat in silence. Just being together. No tension. No unspoken things. My older daughter was still withdrawn. But that night, when I tucked her in, she hugged me first. For the first time in a long while. I started writing things down in a notebook. Not like a diary. More like an anchor to keep from getting lost. I wrote everything. My dreams. How the smell of morning coffee made me feel. How my daughter looked away when I mentioned her father. 2 days later, I turned my phone off. I didn't want to hear excuses. Didn't want it to become another, "I made a mistake." What mattered now wasn't how he felt. It was how I felt. When we came back home a week later, I didn't call ahead. We walked into the apartment. It was empty. He'd moved in with a friend, as I later found out. A note sat on the table. "Call me when you cool down." I tore it up without reading the rest. The next day, we went back to therapy. Just the kids and me. And for the first time, I felt like something in my life was starting to be mine again. He was standing at my door again, wearing the shirt I used to iron for his big meetings, holding flowers far too bright for autumn. I saw him through the peephole and didn't open right away. Just watched as he shifted from foot to foot. Then, without a word, set the bouquet down and walked away. He started showing up more often. First to pick up the kids for walks, then offering coffee. Just to talk. His voice was softer now, his movements tentative, like he was afraid even to breathe too loud near me. And I wasn't angry. That was the scariest part, because anger is energy. But what I felt was flat, cold distance. A few weeks later, he started texting. Long messages, pages full of regret, memories, pleas. He wrote that he knew he'd destroyed everything, that he was ready to start over, that he finally understood. But not once did he say, "I'm sorry." Just, "I'm not okay without you. And I can't do this alone." That's when I realized he didn't want to come back to me. He wanted to come back to comfort, to the life where he got forgiven, where someone waited for him. Then one day, he came in person. No flowers, no charm. Just a tired man on my doorstep. He sat down on the couch and dropped his head. The kids went to their rooms, sensing the tension. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time, and he said, "I'm alone." He started talking, told me the woman he threw everything away for had left him, said she found out he'd been lying to her the same way he lied to me, that he promised her a future but couldn't let go of his past. He didn't cry, just whispered, like every word was costing him breath. He admitted he was sure I'd forgive him, because I always had before, because I was home. He wasn't asking to fix things, just to start something new. even if it was just a conversation. I looked at him and felt nothing. No rage, no revenge, not even relief. He was a stranger now. Not an enemy, not a monster. Just a man who once betrayed me, now begging to return to a life that didn't exist anymore. After he left, I sat by the window for a long time. Watching him walk back to his car, slow and hunched, I remembered how many times I'd imagined this moment. How many nights I'd hoped he'd regret, that he'd finally see what he'd done. And now that he had, it changed nothing. A week later, I got the official letter from the lawyer. The court finalized custody. The kids would live with me. He could visit on weekends. He'd pay child support and contribute to the rent. He tried to argue at first, then gave up. At the hearing, he couldn't even look at me. My mother, the one who once asked me to give him another chance, told me she was proud of me. Said she'd always known I'd reach this point. Now he lives in a small rental. Alone. He tells the kids he's fine. Says, Daddy just works a lot. I don't interfere. I just watch them find their own balance. My older daughter barely talks to him. My younger one still believes. I let her. She'll see it on her own, in time. I don't know if he's happy, but I know this. There's no going back. It's been almost a year since the night I closed the door on my past. Back then, it felt like nothing lay ahead but emptiness. But instead of emptiness, there was a path. Slow, uneven, sometimes shaky, but mine. I walked it, stumbling, retreating, but moving a little farther every day. I got a job at a small marketing agency. The salary wasn't high, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was feeling needed again. Coming home and knowing I earned this bread, this dinner, this light in the room where my daughters sleep. My older daughter withdrew into herself. She didn't talk about him. She drew in black and white, and every sketch had a crack in it. I didn't rush her. I just sat nearby, reading, silent, stroking her back when she cried at night. The younger one missed him. She still hoped everything would go back to how it used to be, but over time, she too began to let go. We grew closer, without lies, without tension, without the constant shadow hanging over every breakfast. In the mornings, they hugged me, laughed, watched movies in my bed, asked for pancakes. We were learning to be a family again, without illusions, without a father. He called, often at first, then less. He asked about the girls, tried to talk about other things. I answered briefly. Only what was necessary. Everything else had died. A couple of months ago, I took a leap and enrolled in evening courses. I wanted to study graphic design, but I chose psychology. I don't know if I'll ever work in that field, but understanding myself felt more urgent. The classes were tough. Sometimes I'd leave with shaking hands, but I didn't quit. At a cafe near my job, I met a man. Jake. He works nearby. At first, we just exchanged greetings, then chatted while waiting in line. One day, he brought me coffee when I hadn't had time to order. We laughed. No pressure, no flirting. Just honest human interaction. He didn't ask probing questions. Didn't try to fix me. He just existed next to me. We've gone on a few walks. He hasn't met the kids yet. Maybe he won't for a while. I'm not looking to replace my ex. I'm not looking for rescue. Right now, I'm simply allowing myself to be near someone who lets me breathe easy. Recently, I opened my old journal. I reread the first entries, each line filled with pain, fear, guilt. I could barely recognize myself. But I saw strength there too. And today, for the first time in a long while, I picked up my pen and wrote, I am not a victim. I am not the ruins of a family. I am not a woman who was betrayed. I am the author of my life. And I believe myself.